when you talk about that acronym soup, there's all different players in this space. There's FAST, which is free ad-supported streaming TV. We have our own FAST channel, the Roku channel, and then we have partner apps on our platform like Pluto or Tubi. On top of that, you have AVOD, which is ad-supported video on demand. So that's something like a Hulu. Then you have SVOD, which is subscription video on demand. So think the premium Apple TV, maybe Netflix, which is now obviously expanded to be ad-supported. So AVOD, but that's starting to blur. And then the last one you mentioned is virtual MVPD. So think like a YouTube TV or a Hulu Live. Those are kind of the four major ones, but we continue to see those lines blur as consumers have subscription fatigue and businesses want to monetize their ads.
Welcome to the Pubway podcast. Each episode will showcase a conversation with a leader from the publishing world. If you're working at a publisher, a DSP or SSP, or you're just curious about the media industry and want to sit down and pick the brains of the experts from within the publishing space, then this is the show for you. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Season 2 of the Pubway podcast. My name is Iannacchino.
And I'm Mike Villalobos. Tough to believe it's already Season 2.
Crazy.
I don't know where time goes. But in today's episode, as the breaker of Season 2, we're going to talk all things connected TV in the digital advertising landscape. And that's going to go everything from a 101, breaking down the alphabet soup that are the acronyms that are rampant within our industry, through to some of the advanced innovations that are coming through and how Roku is approaching this in the future.
And today it's my pleasure to introduce Miles Fisher, the Senior Director of Strategic Advertising Partnerships at Roku, to bring us through this amazing conversation. Miles, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Tina and Mike. Excited to be here.
Love it, man. Honestly, I think this has been the one I've looked forward to the most, given all the innovation that Roku has come out with in the last 24 months. So again, can't thank you enough. I think it'd be great to have you jump into an introduction of yourself and just tell people your background and how you ended up at Roku.
Great to be here again. And I don't know if I'll hold it against you. You said most excited, although I am the first one in Season 2. But I'll be at Roku for 2 years in September, which kind of feels like it's been a lifetime, but also super fast. And I joined Roku by way of T-Mobile advertising most recently. So I went over there where I kind of helped stand up the advertising business that was really focused on mobile data. And prior to that, I spent about 6 years at Google, really focused on the Google marketing platform. So that's their ad server, their DSP, and their analytics suite. And even before that, I got my career started at MediaMath. So I proudly say that I've spent my entire career in programmatic, and Roku has been a really exciting intersection of television, programmatic, and ad tech. And I think we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today.
Love it. I think first things first, let's kick things off with the basics, right?
Yes.
In the world of CTV or connected TV, what are some of the main things people should know when it comes to, say, what is a fast channel? What is an MVPD? If you can give kind of a high level 101, just so when we throw these acronyms around just for the sake of time and shortage, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, of course. So first thing when we talk about Roku is we really let people know that we're an operating system. So if you think about what's on your desktop or your computer or mobile with Android or Apple, that's an operating system. And on top of an operating system, there's all different applications that are built. In streaming, it's tended to evolve from what was traditional TV on linear to streaming. And with that, a lot of different players that were broadcasters or new applications have been built on top of the operating system. So when you talk about that acronym soup, there's all different players in this space. There's FAST, which is free ad-supported streaming TV. We have our own FAST channel, the Roku channel. And then we have partner apps on our platform like Pluto or Tubi. On top of that, you have AVOD, which is ad-supported video on demand. So that's something like a Hulu. Then you have SVOD, which is subscription video on demand. So think the premium Apple TV, maybe Netflix, which is now obviously expanded to be ad-supported. So AVOD, but that's starting to blur. And then the last one you mentioned is virtual MVPD. So think like a YouTube TV or a Hulu Live. So those are kind of the four major ones, but we continue to see those lines blur as consumers have subscription fatigue and businesses want to monetize their ads.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great foundation to provide our audience with, especially the college-based listeners that are on, and kind of going forward with all those acronyms in mind. How has kind of Roku evolved in recent years within all these acronyms? And of course, as CTV adoption has continued to grow.
Yeah, so most people don't know this, but Roku is almost a 20-year-old company. And Roku is Japanese for six because it was our founder's sixth company that he created. And he actually built it inside of Netflix. So Roku was spun out of Netflix as the hardware business. And, dating back to the original Roku business, it's what we kind of call dongles or sticks and pucks. You plugged it into an old TV and you made kind of a dumb TV smart. Fast forward, almost 20 years later, earlier this year, we announced we were making Roku-branded TVs. So that's end-to-end Roku technology on the hardware, Roku operating system. And we've kind of been on that journey from kind of plug into the back of a TV to owning the solution end-to-end, because we've just been developing at such a fast clip around consumer experience, ad innovation. And similar to other hardware companies that own an operating system a la Apple, we want to continue to innovate and push the industry forward.
You mentioned kind of streamlining a few times in that conversation, or in that point. Look, shoppable media, retail media, depending, just a lot of it's kind of in the same realm, if you will. But I think because you have an operating system, it's very connected into what the workflow or experience would be. Can you walk me through how do you guys approach not interrupting the user experience while also maintaining business outcomes and honestly innovating? Because a lot of CTV or TV in general has always been laid back. If I go to my phone to search it later on, great, but it's very much a branding focus. Whereas what I've seen from Roku in the last probably 12 to 24 months is that shoppable unit where you can even click through in some instances or actually buy a retail item inside the actual TV experience.
Yeah, so the promise of streaming has always been that it'll be more like digital than traditional television, right? I think we're still in the very early innings of that journey. The initial shift from linear to streaming was all about matching reach and frequency. And we've done that by building a large ecosystem of partner apps and ushering advertiser dollars from linear to streaming. And those are more called brand-based KPIs. As more adoption has happened in streaming, we're in a really unique position as the operating system layer. We're in over 83 million households globally. And what that means as the operating system is when someone turns on their Roku, they boot up and subscribe, name, phone number, email address. We have a program called Roku Pay where we're capturing credit card information. And when you think of really successful performance or shoppable ecosystems, there's low friction, right? So if you're shopping on something like a Facebook app or Instagram, right, a lot of that information is pre-populated. And that's something we've been really focused on as kind of the TV operating system. So when you think about the user experience, our shoppability really comes in two key places. Firstly is on the Roku channel. That's our fast platform. We have all different call to actions and overlays. We have a program called Action Ads where you can use your remote control to click to purchase or send yourself an SMS, text, or an email. So we know that a lot of the purchasing is still going to happen on your mobile device or on your PC, right? Training consumers to shop on television, we're so early, but we've seen really good adoption of using the remote control. It's much more natural than using a QR code. So there's that bucket, which we refer to as kind of that okay to checkout, and that's in stream. The other opportunity that we're really seeing a lot of growth is on our home screen unit. So that's when you turn on your Roku, that's directly in front of 83 million households. There is no difference if you have a subscription service versus a free service, right? So the ability to reach consumers who are not in ad environments has become really important. When we've done a lot of partnerships on that front with the likes of Instacart, with Kroger, with Walmart. So we're actually doing native shopping integrations where you use the remote and we're adding kind of to your cart, driving you to an app, reminding you later that you can go purchase. So when we think about those two buckets, the main thing they both have in common is frictionless or friction-free, and using the remote control to try to drive that down funnel action.
And not to challenge you too much here, but do you feel that the home screen ad placement sometimes can be misleading for an advertiser at times, just because what if someone's asleep or what if they're in the kitchen? Again, not trying to call it out, but by any means, but I think just the elephant in the room.
Yeah, I would say particularly on the units I'm talking about, they're highly interactive and clickable, right? We actually see, different engagement based on different times of day or how long your television's on, right? So if you've actually turned your TV on and you're going to look at that ad unit in that first minute or first placement, that's a really high value, right? The same way in television or streaming, advertisers want that first pod or that lead in, right? And that's what we kind of talk a lot about at Roku is we're that lead in to television. And we say that the streaming wars are being fought on our platform versus us participating in them. But your question's a valid one, right? Like the real question that all marketers are trying to solve is someone paying attention to my ad and what is that level of engagement? And we work with a variety of measurement partners to help us do that, whether that's the like of iSpot, or there's other partners in this space who are looking more at attention metrics and performance metrics than traditional reach and frequency.
Totally.
Yeah, and I have a few Roku TVs in my rental property just because it makes it easy with guest mode and people can like log in and, you know, enter their own subscriber information. And I've noticed that if it is like on its own for a little bit, the screensaver does come up and like the ad goes away. So there's definitely, I understand, like a timer or some sort of activity going on. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's an interesting difference between our screensaver ad unit, which is what we call Roku City. That's certainly really whimsical. It's kind of surprise and delight. We put a number of brands in there. We built a Hershey's chocolate factory and we've put delivery services. And, you know, I think it's something like 1 out of every 11 minutes, someone's tweeting about Roku City. Don't quote me on that exact stat, but there's a massive, there's a massive consumer zeitgeist around Roku City. And what we do put there is very different than what we put on the home screen, which is we're really focused on like entertainment adjacent stuff. So dinner and a movie and a partnership with Instacart, right? So we try, or our number one priority is the consumer experience. That's how we've gotten to over 83 million households. The minute we jeopardize that for advertising, that's when kind of the larger consumer experience becomes at risk.
Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty of Easter eggs in the Roku City zeitgeist that we can dig into at some point. Amazing. Well, I mean, besides like kind of the retail shoppable experience, how else do you maybe see the role of CTV evolving and kind of the overall media consumption landscape?
Yeah, so FAST continues to be the fastest growing part on our ecosystem. So again, whether that's the Roku channel, I believe you guys had Tubi on in season 1.
Yep.
The reason we continue to see such a large adoption of FAST is one, subscription fatigue, right? We see a number of, if you think about yourself and the amount that you're paying for all these premium services. And the other part of that is the number one searched word on our platform is free, right? That was kind of the idea that the Roku channel was born out of. So this idea of more consumers going to free ad-supported streaming and then also quality content going to FAST first, right? So we did that earlier this year and we continue to have a large slate of Roku originals. And once you start to see once you start to see more eyeballs into free ad-supported streaming, that's where those advertising advancements start to come. And Tina, to your question on where's the other part of innovation outside of retail media, I think it is what retail media is trying to accomplish, which is performance.
Yep.
And at the end of the day, when we think about the power of streaming, it's really addressability and audience targeting. And whether that's advertisers bringing in their first-party data, publishers like Roku having massive first-party data assets, our ability to help advertisers achieve business outcomes and bringing new advertisers that have never bought TV before into the ecosystem is extremely exciting to us. So we have a number of mobile gaming companies that we work with that are now looking at streaming as a way to drive mobile app downloads or mobile engagement. Previously, the idea of those guys buying television was a non-starter.
Right.
Too expensive, too hard to get in touch with, the planning teams at either an agency or at the broadcaster. So I would say performance and democratization are kind of the two big things that we see happening in the streaming ecosystem.
I mean, democratizing makes a ton of sense, right? Because it was so, not exclusive, but just tough to get to your point. But as publishers start shifting, even like, even some like news publications are starting to shift a lot more into video focused or even like video on demand type focused streaming platforms. What are some trends that you're seeing that are taking place today and even forming as well in the next probably 6-12 months that maybe not be prevalent right now, but they're going to be strong in the next 12 months that you think are going to take a strong foothold in Roku or other operating systems for that matter?
Yeah, I would say, some of those publications you're mentioning, I'd say there's two paths to get onto a platform like Roku. They can go and stand up their own app. And when you stand up your own app, you have full control of the environment. And then you're actually probably paying a non-trivial marketing cost to kind of drive awareness and adoption. The value of FAST is really just being able to have a channel, right, within a broader FAST streaming platform. And the lift to that is much lower, and the economics are actually much more valuable. So when we think about that democratization, like a lot of the things that we're doing is bringing creators actually in. So we launched a channel with Mr. Beast, right, who's kind of the number one creator on YouTube. His virality is massive. But what is that idea of bringing those into, call it more traditional TV, right? What is the value to them? What is the value to advertisers? One of the things we're hyper focused on is the idea of premium content versus UGC, right? So what it costs to make a TV show, whether that's a news show, an original, there's varying degrees of production. And there's also varying degrees of what the value is back to the marketer buying that. So we often are talking to brands and agencies about content alignment, where their shows are running. We obviously have a lot of tools and technology we built around brand safety. But I think for some of the publishers you're alluding to that may be traditional kind of either short form video or maybe only going on YouTube, what is the way for them to get into streaming? I think FAST is a great starting point, and we're really excited about that.
Do you see a world where UGC collides with professional grade content? Because I think there's so many times where I've seen probably 3 or 4 TikTok stars show up in Netflix movies now. I'm just what's going on here? It's do you think that's going to happen more often? And as we see these creators become their own brand, do they have their own shows? Would love to hear more on the content piece.
Yeah, I think that's already happening, right? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder with what premium is in UGC. Just because you start on UGC, I would say most people who do that, their aspiration is to have a TV show, right? And there are shows that we've done that are originals where some of the folks in the shows got their start on TikTok or Instagram, right? And they have massive influencer followings. And there's a ton of value to that for us as a company. We have a great show that we just did for season 2, Side Hustlers with Ashley Graham, where we are actually promoting female entrepreneurs. And it's a little bit like Shark Tank where they're making investments. And, Ashley Graham has a massive social following, and her ability to drive engagement to a core audience, bring them into the Roku channel. That's been a really successful program for us, both from the content side and the monetization side, that we're really excited about.
Yeah. And I think also another elephant in the room, the election year, I did see with the DNC recently, I think they had Creators for Harris as an example for people filming on the ground.
Yeah.
And they were probably sharing with all the various platforms and channels. And I'm sure different people are still picking it up as well.
Yeah. And that's how a lot of young consumers consume their news in the first place. I think one of the things, to your comment earlier, that there's a lot of college listeners, we continue to see streaming as the best way to reach the younger generation. None of them have cable. A lot of them have Rokus. A lot of them are very used to ad-supported environments, and a lot of them don't want to pay for subscription. So it's a very different consumer profile than call it a boomer or Gen X. They're so used to just engaging and having, really custom delivered experiences, right? They grew up with the likes of Instagram and Snapchat, and on TV, they want to have that right ad at the right moment. So we're really seeing a lot of opportunity kind of for that younger generation as they kind of enter TV, and us kind of blazing the trail there.
Yeah. And I think with that in mind too, for more of the traditional broadcast media publishers who have to make this transition from linear TV into CTV, I guess, what would you recommend some key considerations for them to follow in making that change?
Yeah. So a lot of those are our biggest partners, right? So the fun thing about working at Roku is our CEO proudly says we're the only company in the world that wakes up every morning and only thinks about CTV. Our competitors run massive businesses around retail or search, or they're kind of the traditional broadcasters that businesses have pivoted from linear to streaming. And when we think about those broadcasters, those are massive partners on our platform, right? It's really good for Paramount Plus and Peacock to thrive and be successful. We did an awesome partnership with NBC around the Olympics, where we're creating an Olympic zone. And one of the things we're really excited about is the idea of solving the pain point of content discovery. So we've built these zones that are for really high impact things like food, sports, home improvement, where we know that we have content on the Roku channel, but there's also great content across our publishing partner apps. And if we can help a consumer get into those apps sooner and find content faster, it's something like the average consumer spends, I think, 11 minutes at night looking for content, right? If you think about yourself and what you want to watch at night. So if Roku can solve that problem and get more people watching content versus searching for it, we're really doing a service to the whole ecosystem.
11 minutes, that's decisive. It takes me at least a cool 20.
Yeah. On a good day.
Right? I have 2 questions, and I'll break them up. But I think the first one is, there have been a lot of nightmare instances with ad podding and just doubling up, or having just multiple ads that are just stuffed into a certain spot. How do you solve for that? Is it through transparency? Is it through just better planning, better technology? That's the first question. And the second is, to tail one on that, what are some things to avoid if you're a publisher going into advanced TV?
Great question. So the short answer to your first question is technology, right? So the one thing that Roku is at its core is a technology company before we're a content company, before we're an advertising company. And we actually, earlier this year, we launched the Roku Exchange. And the Roku Exchange does exactly what you're describing, or it solves exactly what you're describing. So it's actually a mediation layer that sits on top of all of our SSP partners and helps us actually, in a holistic auction, monetize each impression. And what we're really doing there is we're trying to serve the right impression at the highest value to a consumer, while also managing frequency on our side to make sure that we are not kind of over serving the same unit in the same pod. One of the reasons that we actually have made a lot of advancements in this technology is because we not only have our own inventory as the Roku channel, but we also have inventory shares from our partners on our apps. And when we get inventory from the likes of those partners, it's really important for us to make sure that we're able to understand holistically some of what the ads are running on those partners so that we're not sending the same impression or the same ad within the same pod, and we deliver a good user experience. And we're able to do that because we're the operating system and we see a ton of signals across the ecosystem.
That's fair. And then I guess for the second part of that is like, what are some advice points that you would give to a publisher if they're just now considering going from linear to like full-fledged investments into advanced TV?
Yeah, so I would say talk to your SSP partners. Our SSPs are really big partners of our ecosystem, and so are our DSP partners. We work really closely, and a big charter for our team over the past year and a half has been around interoperability, meeting buyers where they are. But I would say when you're working with your SSP partners, it's not only understanding the technology, but it's also understanding what they can do for you in market, whether that's demand facilitation, helping you guys differentiate your media. So the thing about streaming that I would say is most different than call it traditional publishing is there aren't as many publishers in the ecosystem. So that becomes an opportunity if you've been a desktop or mobile or display publisher for years. If you can figure out how to crack the medium, there is a large appetite kind of for that next, call it 50, 100 streaming platforms that we're always excited about monetizing on our operating system. So I think there's really still early days in partners kind of standing up and building on top of that.
Absolutely. And then I think it would also be interesting on the flip side for the advertiser buy side part of the conversation. What would you recommend for advertisers who are more used to transacting in that linear experience when they are shifting into CTV?
Data, right? That's it. Like that's the future of streaming, right? We have a massive household graph and first party data asset. If you're an advertiser that's interested in driving business outcomes, get your first party data organized, have a strong CRM, work with good onboarding partners. One of the things that we'll be launching later this year is the Roku Ads Manager. And that's all about a self-serve tool for D2C, SMB, smaller advertisers. And under that vein of democratization, what we're doing there is we're going to allow advertisers to bring their first party data into streaming, and it'll look a lot more like Facebook ads or TikTok ads than a traditional DSP onboarding through an identity partner. And when we do something like that, the opportunity is massive for a local retailer or a local auto dealership to kind of find new consumers on the biggest screen in the household.
Absolutely. And I think we might have joked on this on a prior episode, but the first party subscriber data and like viewing history is really interesting data to dabble with. Like, can we see if somebody's been watching 6 hours of really sad shows and, sort of a BetterHelp or therapy ad or, like there's an interesting area to play.
A bunch of breakup movies.
That sounds like a very specific use case if you the BetterHelp ad for all your binging, but that's exactly,
I'm not crying, you're crying.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I would say excited a lot of the large linear broadcasters when they first got into streaming is the idea of deduplicated reach. And we have a really massive ACR panel. And if you're an advertiser that's buying a ton of linear spots and you want to reach the user on streaming, the best way to do that is to create a suppression list or an extension list. And that's something that advertisers come to us all day for.
And Miles, can you shed some light on like what does transparency mean, right? Because like that word gets thrown around kind of frivolously, in my opinion. But like we're like, well, show transparency, and it's like, right, but like, is that because everyone else is opaque? And like, what does that mean for Roku? And what do you provide either to your publisher partners and or the advertiser partners? That'd be super helpful.
Yeah. So we've been on this journey, as I mentioned, of interoperability, and part of being interoperable means making not only your inventory available on buying platforms, but also passing the correct content signals, right? So there's varying degrees of transparency, as you mentioned, and some of that is really constrained to rights of content, right? Whether that's our app, the Roku channel, and it's our originals, we can share more information because we own that end to end. Then there's kind of content that's on the Roku channel that isn't ours, and there's limitations on that. Then there's also apps that we get inventory from, and we have agreements with those partners. So transparency is kind of a sliding scale. And like most things, it boils down to legalese. But a lot of it comes from a desire for us to want to meet marketers where they are, and we continue to pass as many signals as we can. I think the last thing that I'll add that I think I always touch on for folks maybe not as familiar with TV and streaming is, unlike digital, there is a law in television called VPAA that actually essentially limits what you can share that consumers are viewing. So outside of content agreements, transparency, signal requests, like the actual things of programmatic and content partners, they're unlike, in social, you hear, I think it's, I'm blanking on the amendment, but that a lot of social companies hide behind that actually allow them to not be content moderators. In television, there's actually a law that was passed sometime in the 50s, 60s, 70s. Again, don't quote me on the date. VPAA that limits what can be shared.
Got it. It's almost like HIPAA.
Yeah.
For television.
For data and TV.
Yeah. Or any of the pharma ads. What is it? ISI?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. There's too many to keep track of. All these acronyms.
But they're important to follow. And at the end of the day, like, we need to do right by consumers and by our content partners. So I think your comment, Mike, transparency means different things to different people. I think at the end of the day, it's about having a conversation as a publisher with the advertisers and as an operating system with our content partners.
Being an operating system, and I mean, that's such a powerful place to be in. And to your point earlier, you guys wake up, live, breathe CTV, right? Not many people can say that, if any. Do you see kind of the next step where you guys become the gold standard of what all that means, or what transparency is, what access means, democratization? I mean, all of that honestly rings very true in the needs that I've seen within the ad tech ecosystem, but I can only see it happening from a foundational level, which would be an operating system.
Yeah, so we're continuing to invest in a lot of those areas, and it's something we're really excited about in the future. I won't comment too much around where we're headed on that, but I think
more innovation, man. Come on.
what I'll say is it's part of this charter around interoperability, right?
Sure.
It's all on this sliding scale. First inventory, then some signals. But at the end of the day, we are sitting on a ton of data that can help push the industry forward. And whether that's solving things like measurement, targeting, planning, those are how we work with some of our largest advertisers in the world today. And being able to do that at scale to bring transparency, viewability, performance, all those things that we've been touching on throughout this, that starts and stops with data. And that's a foundation to our business.
Absolutely. So would you say data is probably one of the biggest challenges the publishers are facing within the CTV space overall?
Totally. Again, it's not too different than I would say what's happening or has always happened, right? Like, history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And if you think about desktop, mobile, and now streaming, they're all very similar disciplines, and they're all kind of on different parts of that journey. On desktop, obviously, the cookie was super important, and a lot of advertisers got their first party data organized as Google was talking about that going away. Within mobile, you have really two key players, Apple and Android. And what Apple did with the IFA, right, and limiting that for mobile, that changed that entire industry, and Apple's taking a different stance there. For us as the operating system, we account for one of every two CTV impressions sold. And when we think about our ID, we call it the Roku ID for advertising. That is incredibly valuable in the ecosystem, and we're able to append that to different signals, to different buyers and different personas. Our ability to drive impact for marketers and publishers becomes really interesting.
I mean, as we wind down here, I think it's fair to say that this has been a very insightful conversation.
Yeah, we could definitely keep talking.
Yeah. I want to keep probing, but you're not going to give me anything, so I'm going to stop there.
One more probe, maybe. If it's a really good one, maybe I'll answer.
Oh man, on the spot.
You said it.
Yeah, right.
It is season 2.
Hot takes. Here we go. What is actually? I have one for you. What do you think is going to be the biggest pain coming up in 2025? And do you think it's solvable, or is it going to be something we have to work around?
I think the biggest pain is the biggest opportunity, and that's helping marketers plan correctly. There has been a massive shift in eyeballs to streaming, but the dollars haven't moved there yet. And again, we saw that in mobile, and we saw that with social. Right. So what that really creates is, if you're an advertiser, is an arbitrage opportunity. And it's the same thing that happened on mobile with D2C companies, right? The companies that built their business on the back of social, they ran really hard at it. And those are the biggest D2C brands that you see in the world today. The Allbirds, the Caspers, right? Like, you don't even think of those as D2C anymore. That same opportunity is happening right now in streaming, right? Where you have big brands that are continuing to move, and some of them big brands tend to not move as quickly. And what that means is an upstart, and that could be a company that traditionally spent on search and social now moving to streaming. It could be a company that none of us have ever heard of that says, hey, streaming is my opportunity. So if you can help a big brand plan from linear to streaming and do that quickly, or if you can be an upstart brand and say, hey, this is how I'm going to build my business. And when you build that top of funnel, we see the impact down funnel, right? The idea that a TV ad is going to have the same CAC or ROAS as a $3 search or social ad, that doesn't work. That's a math equation. But when you buy a TV ad and then you look at your decreased CAC and ROAS, that makes sense all day. And we're seeing marketers run at that really quickly.
All right. Well, now you open a can of worms. I'm going to hijack a little bit more. I apologize. But it's the tailwind on exactly what you just said, but I want to expand on it because the first one's going to be, do you think social plays into that exact platform? Or do you think there's a point where you're watching TikTok ads in a vertical format, but in a large screen or whatever it may be from entertainment purposes?
TV is often a two-screen experience, right? If you think about yourself, you're on your couch, your TikTok or Instagram, pick your poison. But at the end of the day, when someone is watching TV, that ad that comes on, sight, sound, emotion, if it's good creative, the engagement there is proven for 50 plus years if you go back to Mad Men. So I don't think it's necessarily an either or, but it's how you do both really well together. And that's where what we talked about at the top of the show with things like our action ads or click to text. And it goes back to what we're building in our ads manager, where the same marketer who logs into Google or Facebook can log into an ads manager, create creative that has those action ads, drives them to a Shopify store, drives them to a text, is looking at that in their same Google Analytics suite, measuring things holistically. Becomes a really, really exciting opportunity.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I even saw Instagram recently announce that their main metric they were changing to views, which again kind of drives into you have to be super specific and creative and engaging on your visuals, which not saying people were lazy before, but there's definitely more room for laziness.
It's kind of competitive, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially like in that D2C era, how many times do you see like the same templated ad come through and you're like, we get it. It just has a brand, a sticky thing, whatever.
Yep. So you said the quiet part out loud. The companies that taught us to pay for every last click and cookie bump or whatever it was, or going up funnel. And where the other opportunity in this realm of democratization of streaming is creative variance, right? You can make a zillion Facebook ads and you can make a ton of Google ads and you can do creative optimization. We have some brands and agencies that are now testing and doing that in TV, right? Having different call to actions on the bottom, breaking the fourth wall and saying, hey, do you hear me? You know, if you went to a big studio, you would never do that in a zillion years. So again, like these growth hackers, like what we think the opportunity in streaming, like no one has really cracked the code yet. And that's what we're really excited about. And things like AI upscaling creative and creative variation, like that is still a couple years out, but that's where we see a lot of this heading.
I love it. Okay. One last point that I want to call out that I think is really worthwhile. And it's an opportunity, in my opinion, for platforms on the advanced TV side. Just because if you look at women's sports right now and contracts, it's no surprise. I think women get paid 10x lower than the average professional athlete. But one arbitrage and a half that I saw was if you looked at the NCAA women's final, 24.3 million viewers. You look at the NBA finals, 11.2 million. Right. So that's just wild to me. And the reason why that happens is because the networks haven't renegotiated the contracts, which then gets a waterfall effect into how players are compensated and ideally in a much larger way in the next probably 3 or 5 years. This is why I think we're seeing Thursday Night Football go to Amazon, why we're seeing certain things go to streaming services. This is more of a perspective that I would love to, whether it's a hot take or a real take, Miles, let me know what you think here. But I think there's a big opportunity for y'all to step up and actually change the game a little bit in the right way, because doing the right thing is naturally the right thing, but also in a way for marketers and advertisers.
Yeah. So you set me up well for this one. We actually launched the Women's Sports Zone earlier this year.
We didn't even know. We swear.
But it gave me a layup. I have to take it. But what you're getting at is really the core of what Roku can do, right? Where as rights are moving from Amazon to Apple to Warner Brothers Discovery, right? I think it's something like there's now going to be 5 NBA games a week on 5 different apps. I'm a huge NBA fan. I'm really excited about that. But the idea of memorizing what app is on what night is daunting. So that's why we built these zones. So if you're a sports fan, you go into the zone, we actually recommend the content from the apps directly. And you just see it's the Lakers versus the Knicks, right? You don't have to remember that's on Amazon Prime. And we did that specifically for women's sports around the NCAA tournament last year. And we're going to continue to invest in the women's sports zone. Some of the highest content we saw on the Olympics was around women's sports, and we continue to invest there. And the last thing that I'll add is we actually launched a Roku sports channel because we believe that's such a big opportunity. And, that's kind of on the backbone of Rich Eisen. But we also are doing more with, e-racing leagues. And there's all these kind of emerging sports opportunities that, to your point, there's niche audiences. And the idea of niche and television have kind of been on opposite ends of the spectrum, but streaming allows the niche that has always been on the internet, whatever you're super into, actually be surfaced and recommended for you. So content discovery, niche programming at scale, those are things we're trying to solve.
Absolutely. I think it's a good beat to end again, as we just said we could talk for 30 more minutes, and then we almost did. But to kind of close it out, I'd love to take a step back from CTV overall, and I'd love to learn more about you specifically and, what's on your bookshelf right now? What are you reading?
Oh man, really good question. I actually just picked up, I haven't started reading it yet, but Unreasonable Hospitality, which is by the founder of 11 Madison Park. It was recommended for me by Charlie Collier, our president of Roku. He told us all to read it when he first got here a year ago, or almost 2 years ago. So I'm way behind. But the concept of it is being unreasonably hospitable, and it's all about 11 Madison Park. My wife read it already, so I've gotten some of the crib notes. But in an industry that is very getting automated, the human touch is still super important. And I spend a lot of time with clients listening, and what the book alludes to, and again, this is just, cliff notes and what I've been told, is the idea of making an impression that isn't necessarily flashy or expensive, right? In one of the chapters, it talks about people being in 11 Madison Park, overhearing that they were in New York and they wanted to eat a hot dog and they didn't get to do it. They went out and got a street dog and put it on the table. And everybody at that table was paying $1,500 for a plate, expensive wine, but that's what they remember. So this idea of being unreasonably hospitable in a consumer-facing world becomes increasingly important.
I love that. Yeah, I think Danny Meyer has a similar book from Union Square Hospitality, but I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, honestly,
I love that.
It's a good way to live.
It is. Amazing. Well, Miles, thank you so much for joining us today. Really great conversation.
I can keep going forever, but you've been a gem to talk to you today, and I can't thank you enough for coming on.
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you.